You're listening to the Financial Source podcast on YouTube.
Welcome to the Financial Source podcast. Today, global markets are caught in a tense moment, navigating three major fault lines that are colliding simultaneously. A critical interest rate decision from the Federal Reserve, escalating U.S.-China technology conflict, and intensifying geopolitical stress emanating from Eastern Europe.
Exactly. And these forces are shaping, well, everything, from the core cost of capital to the volatile price of oil. We're even seeing it in currency markets, especially the Japanese yen, which has recently drawn some very sharp scrutiny from Tokyo officials.
And we'll show you exactly how these conflicting signals about semiconductor trade are creating a kind of market whiplash right now. The timing is just crucial as the Federal Reserve prepares to set the tone for the final stretch of 2025.
And at the same time, you have these updates on Ukraine's military and diplomatic landscape and some really crucial deadlines, adding a whole new layer of uncertainty to the global risk picture.
By the end of this conversation, you will understand the interconnected nature of these drivers and what they mean for global risk appetite. We want to give you a clear roadmap of the pressures closing out the year.
Let's unpack it.
Okay, so let's start with that immediate monetary backdrop. The entire financial world is, it's sitting on edge ahead of today's Federal Reserve decision.
It's forcing this cautious, defensive posture everywhere.
Especially because we're also waiting for the updated dot plot. For anyone who needs a quick refresher, that's the chart showing where each Federal Reserve official thinks rates should be in the coming years. Why does that specific piece of paper matter so much today?
Well, it matters because the market has, already fully priced in what they expect the Federal Reserve to do today. That's not the news.
Right, it's not about now.
Exactly. The real debate, the thing everyone's watching, is the trajectory for 2026 and beyond. If those dots shift higher, it fundamentally changes valuation models for everything.
And the dollar's showing this tension perfectly, isn't it? It's just stuck.
It is. Trapped in a tight range, holding steady near 99.
Which is interesting, especially after that recent U.S. JOLTS data, the job opening survey. It showed the labor market is still hotter than a lot of people anticipated.
It did.
So if the labor market is that strong, shouldn't we have seen a much more aggressive reaction in the dollar? Maybe a sharp rally as people dial back those rate cut hopes?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the nuance of this whole environment. The strong JOLTS data did prompt traders to unwind some of their more aggressive 2026 rate cut bets.
Which is normally dollar supportive.
Normally. But the dollar isn't soaring because of the other two fault lines we're talking about. There's this deep underlying caution driven by geopolitical risk.
A flight to safety.
Yes, but that safety bit is being held back by all this uncertainty around the semiconductor conflict. So traders are just hesitant to commit aggressively one way or the other until they hear the specific language from the Federal Reserve Chair.
So the dollar is a risk-off currency, but the market can't decide how risky things really are.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And while the dollar is stuck, that pressure is transferring somewhere else, specifically to the Japanese yen. We saw it climb toward the 157 handle. Why is that level so significant? It immediately brought out that classic jawboning from Tokyo officials.
Right. The 157 handle really seems to be a key psychological and political threshold. It's a level of weakness that starts to cause serious pain for Japanese consumers through higher import costs.
Even if it's good for big exporters.
Exactly. So when we say jawboning, we mean those officials coming out and publicly saying they are closely watching currency moves and are ready to act.
It's the last warning shot before direct intervention.
It is. It's a clear signal to the market that Japan has a line in the sand, and the strong dollar is testing the limits of the Bank of Japan's passive stance.
It also tells you that domestic data, like their recent producer price numbers, basically don't matter right now.
Not at all. It's all about the Federal Reserve.
So we have this central bank decision holding the market hostage. And that decision is already getting wrapped up in potential political implications. I'm thinking of the talk that Kevin Hassett is the front runner to replace Jerome Powell. What kind of signal does that potential transition send to the markets?
It adds another layer of long-term risk that the market has to factor in. Any change at the top is significant, but Hassett's public statement that he would be apolitical is a critical piece of reassurance.
Because investors need to believe the central bank will stay independent.
Absolutely. If the market even sniffed that a new chair was politically motivated, you'd see a major and immediate reassessment of inflation expectations. It just shows that political transition risk, however speculative, is a real part of this backdrop.
Okay, so that tension around the Federal Reserve is already pushing investors toward caution. But that caution is being compounded by our second fault line, the contradictory signals on U.S.-China tech trade.
This is where you're getting that market whiplash you mentioned, almost hourly.
Because tech stocks are the heart of current market valuations.
And the supply chain for advanced semiconductors, the brains of AI, it runs directly through this geopolitical tension. The conflicting news is exactly why we saw a volatility spike in the tech sector.
Let's break down that contradiction.
Yeah.
First, the news seemed really supportive.
It did. It gave the market a massive lift.
President Trump reportedly told President Xi the U.S. would allow NVIDIA's high-performance H200 chips to be shipped to approved Chinese customers. And the thinking was this would apply to AMD and Intel too.
It felt like a de-escalation, a huge positive signal unlocking a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream.
But there was a very interesting detail in there. Trump's claim that 25% of the proceeds will go to the United States.
Yes. If that's true, it fundamentally changes the nature of that trade. It turns chip sales into a direct revenue source for the U.S.
Yeah.
It's basically protectionism packaged as commerce.
But that optimism, it didn't even last a day. The counter-narrative emerged from Beijing and just plunged sentiment right back into doubt.
They immediately introduced a potential choke point.
On those exact same chips.
The very same H200 chips. Reports are that China is preparing to require special security reviews for any shipments. So Washington offers the chips, but Beijing installs a new bureaucratic hurdle.
It just confirms the underlying tension hasn't gone away. It's just shifted from bans to regulatory control.
Precisely. And this all reinforces China's main goal.
Technological self-sufficiency.
And the clearest signal of that came from their domestic procurement list. For the first time, China has added domestic AI chips to its official list.
Which is more than symbolic, right? It's an economic strategy.
It is. By prioritizing domestic suppliers for government purchases, they are guaranteeing demand, subsidizing R&D, and telling their own tech firms that the state has their back. The message is clear. U.S. chips are a temporary solution. The long-term goal is decoupling.
And this friction, importantly, isn't just about cutting-edge chips. We're seeing it in broader trade, which really measures the level of trust between them.
Which is arguably even more damaging to risk sentiment.
Tell us about the huge shortfall in the soybean agreement.
This is a crucial point because it takes us from future tech to current massive commodity markets. China is way behind on its purchase commitments under a key Trump-era deal.
How far behind?
They were supposed to buy 12 million metric tons since October. They've bought less than 3 million.
Wow.
That kind of shortfall in a core commodity market represents a clear breach of a high-profile promise. It just erodes the foundation of trust.
And that erosion isn't just a U.S.-China thing either, is it?
Oh, not at all. The U.S.-Indonesia trade deal is at risk over claims of backtracking. And the U.S. has signaled very clearly to South Africa that if they want better tariffs, they need to address existing trade barriers.
So the U.S. is taking a much harder, more transactional line globally.
They are, which means for investors, trade policy isn't a background item anymore. It's a dominant macro variable.
Okay, so we've got monetary policy frozen, trade policy being whipsawed. Now for the third major fault line, the geopolitical shifts in Ukraine. These are creating tangible physical risks.
Especially to European energy markets.
The diplomatic timeline seems to be speeding up. Reports suggest President Trump has given President Zelensky days to respond to a peace proposal.
That short deadline puts immense political pressure on Kyiv to articulate its non-negotiables and to do it fast.
And Zelensky himself seems to be preparing for that, expecting leader-level talks next week. What's really interesting is his readiness to discuss an energy ceasefire.
The energy ceasefire is the most pragmatic piece of diplomacy on the table right now. It suggests Kyiv recognizes that the conflict's economic impact is centered on that infrastructure.
An agreement there could provide immediate relief to European energy prices.
It could. But Zelensky conditioned his domestic political moves on external guarantees. He said Ukraine is prepared to hold elections in 60 to 90 days, but only if the U.S. and European Union partners guarantee security for the process.
Which just highlights how fragile the situation is. Meanwhile, what's the military context on the ground?
It remains intensely difficult. Ukraine's top commander, Syrsky, did report a tactical victory regaining parts of Pokrovsk. But he tempered that with a warning that Russia has amassed roughly 156,000 troops in that area. That troop count is a clear indicator of scale and intensity.
Meaning the risk of a major escalation is still acute.
Absolutely. And that's preventing any meaningful de-risking in European assets.
Despite that, Western commitment is still very vocal. European Commission President von der Leyen said the EU remains ironclad in its support.
That ironclad language is designed to reassure markets, but it also draws a direct response from the Kremlin, which dismissed European warnings about aggression toward NATO as complete nonsense.
And that rhetorical standoff keeps the risk premium baked into prices.
Firmly baked in. And it directly impacts commodity supply, which connects right back to inflation and the Federal Reserve's job.
Let's talk about that specific Russian attack on gas infrastructure.
This is a critical link. There was a Russian drone attack that specifically targeted Ukrainian gas infrastructure run by Naftogaz,
Which is central to their energy security.
and historically a key transit route. By targeting gas infrastructure, the risk of a supply disruption just ratchets up immediately. It adds a specific, tangible layer of cost and potential inflation risk right onto European energy markets.
So let's pull this all together. How are these three drivers, monetary policy, tech friction, and geopolitics, translating into market action right now? What's the risk tone?
The risk tone is extremely cautious. We saw U.S. futures just struggle for direction overnight.
Bouncing around.
Wildly. And it was largely driven by those contradictory NVIDIA headlines we talked about. The positive news and the negative news just canceled each other out, leaving investors unwilling to take a strong position.
Let's zoom in on energy, which is reacting to all three of these things.
Yeah.
Oil prices tried to recover, but were clearly capped. Why?
They were capped by a combination of the Fed's restrictive stance and some very mixed U.S. inventory data, and we really need to break down the nuance in that inventory report.
Okay.
Private sector figures showed a crude oil draw of 4.8 million barrels. A draw is typically bullish for prices. It suggests robust demand.
But the devil is in the details.
Exactly. The bullish crude draw was completely countered by a much larger than expected gasoline build of 7.0 million barrels.
So what does that tell you?
It suggests refiners processed a lot of crude, but consumers are not buying or using the finished product gasoline as quickly as we thought. It's the ultimate mixed signal. Good processing activity, but potentially weaker consumer demand.
And that demand uncertainty, plus the Fed, keeps a cap on any rally.
A firm cap. And then you had the Energy Information Administration lower its 2025 world oil demand outlook while raising its production forecast.
Which is a fundamentally bearish combination long term.
And we had concrete supply-side news, too. Libya resumed operations at several major export terminals. Anytime that infrastructure comes back online, it adds barrels to the global market.
So while Ukraine adds a risk premium,
The fundamental supply-demand picture is currently soft.
finally, let's touch on precious metals. Silver, in particular, had a huge moment ahead of the Fed.
Yes, silver was the real standout, surging to a fresh record high above $61 an ounce earlier in the session. Gold was flatter.
But the rally faded.
It faded as traders squared up positions. But that surge, even if it was temporary, tells you something important about the collective anxiety. When investors are this uncertain about rates, trade, and geopolitics, they default to hard assets as a hedge.
Silver's volatility is like a barometer for that intense intersecting uncertainty.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you as you navigate the next few weeks?
I think the core message is absolutely clear. You cannot look at the Federal Reserve in isolation.
Not at all. Its decision is going to be amplified or maybe even countered by the friction over tech trade and the escalation in Europe. These risks are now just inherently intertwined.
And the immediate effect those conflicting tech headlines have on global sentiment is a powerful demonstration of that.
It is. The sheer speed of that market whiplash proves how central technological competition is to macro stability now. It goes far beyond traditional tariffs. So given the pressure on President Zelensky to respond to a peace proposal quickly and his willingness to hold elections if security is guaranteed, what specific market signals should you watch for? In commodity flows or currency stability, that would indicate a fundamental shift in the regional risk profile over the next 2 months.
That's our analysis for today, covering the Federal Reserve countdown, the tech trade battle, and the critical updates out of Ukraine.
Appreciate you tuning in for this essential market briefing. Join us again soon on the Financial Source Podcast.